please give me your full name?
Stefan Raymond Matthews.
And that is Stefan, how do you write that? Stefan?
That's correct.
Your occupation, what do you do?
Currently, I sit on the board of a number of companies. One of those is TAL, a public company in Canada, listed on the CSE. I'm chairman of the board. I'm also chairman of the board of the holding company of the Enchain Group and several companies within the group. I'm also a member of the executive committee of the Bitcoin Association for BSV.
And what is your association to the parties in this case?
Dr. Wright, I've known since 2005 when I first became acquainted with him when I was the CIO of a company in Australia.
Okay, so you are now going to give evidence before the court.
Yes.
In doing so, you are obliged to tell the truth, and this implies telling everything you know and not to conceal anything. And you must state if you are uncertain or if you don't remember. And it's a punishable offense to lie to the court. I will ask you to make an affirmation that the evidence you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So I ask you, do you affirm that you will tell the plain and whole truth and not conceal anything? And if so, please repeat after me, I do so solemnly affirm.
I do solemnly affirm.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you.
Attorney Helle will start asking you questions, and then the other side may have questions, and I might have some questions in the end. We will start now and continue for about 10 minutes, and then we will recess for lunch.
Thank you. Mr. Matthews, could you please start by giving the court a brief summary of your education?
Sure. I hold a Bachelor of Financial Administration from the University of New England in Australia. I also have postgraduate diplomas in management and an MBA where the specialisation was international business.
Regarding your occupation, you have just stated that you are the chairman of the board of Enchain Limited. Is that correct?
Enchain Limited is one of the companies within the group. I'm chairman of the board of the holding company that there are 5 or 6 companies within the Enchain Group.
Does that mean that you are chairman of the board of the holding company that owns one of the companies where Dr. Wright is employed as chief scientist?
That is correct.
Going back some years, you have already mentioned to the court when you met Dr. Wright. When was that?
2005.
And what kind of position did you hold at that time?
At that time, I was the Chief Information Officer of a company in Australia by the name of Centrebet Limited, Proprietary Limited. Centrebet was in the process of preparing for an IPO on the Australian Stock Exchange. And as part of my responsibilities, I sought out audit firms that could undertake a security systems, control systems audit. BDO was the firm that was successful. And when the partner from BDO, who was Melbourne-based and our company was Sydney-based, when the partner from BDO came into our offices and we met in the boardroom to introduce the team, he had 4 people with him. Craig Wright was one of them.
What was Craig Wright's role in that team?
Craig was introduced to me as the audit lead.
And what kind of specific tasks did he then do?
He was responsible for overseeing the activities of the BDO audit group, that were responsible for looking at all of our control systems to make sure that they were compliant, to ensure that any vulnerabilities, we were an online business, so vulnerabilities in the online space were important. We were dealing with customers' funds, so there was a lot of security issues that we needed to ensure we ticked off in our due diligence process for the stock exchange.
How would you describe Dr. Wright's professional and technical skills? Was he the ordinary auditor from BDO or any of the other big auditing companies?
In the first case, yes, pretty much typical of what you'd expect in a professional engagement, but there was something uniquely different about Craig in the way he engaged with the clients. He was very interested in understanding more about their business, the way they did things, why they did things those ways. Almost as if he took an interest in educating people about, how systems could and should look differently, and that was quite different to what you expect or what you generally experience from an auditor.
Well, that's a question of methodology, how you work, but his professional skills as such, his technical skills, his IT skills.
I mean, we were dealing with an area of highly technical. We were dealing with security. We were dealing with firewalls, networks, vulnerabilities. Craig Wright, and I'll refer to him as Craig Wright because he was Craig Wright in those days. He had an enormous number of credentials in this area. People that were part of my team, when they heard that Craig Wright was on the BDO team, they came to me and said, "This is excellent because we've had experiences and we've had colleagues who have had experiences working with Craig Wright in other settings, and his technical understanding in this area is second to none." I delved into that a little bit. The number of certifications that Craig had, I've never seen, and still to this day, I've never seen anyone with that number of certifications in a technical setting.
Well, that's a formal thing then, but his skills as such?
Oh, he was incredibly proficient, knowledgeable, capable. His level of technical engagement with everybody in my organisation that he ever had to engage with, he was held as a clear expert, no doubt about that.
Could you briefly comment on his personal skills?
His interpersonal skills?
Yes.
They were a little different. Craig, I'll give you some examples if that helps. I mean, Craig used to come in to speak to me occasionally or during the audit.
Please do it, but do it briefly.
Yeah, sure. He used to come to visit me to talk about various topics, and it wouldn't matter whether I had someone sitting in my office or not, whether my door was closed or not. I had a glass front office. He would walk in, sit down, and take his place there to talk to me.
And how did you react to that?
Sometimes it was okay. Other times I'd say to him, "Craig, I'm on a phone call or I'm having a meeting here. Could you wait outside till this is finished?" And he was fine.
Okay, so you mentioned that the corporation started with work related to an initial public offering on the Australian Stock Exchange. In the years to follow, did the cooperation between you and Dr. Wright continue? Did he perform other tasks for Centerbet?
Yes, he did. Craig did a number of private engagements with our team around forensic work and advice in specific technical areas. He also continued as I'll call it the primary point of contact between Centerbet and BDO. Remember, the partner was based in Melbourne, so Craig was the audit lead based and living in Sydney, so he was the most senior person that we engaged with at BDO locally in New South Wales. So he took the responsibility of follow-up. I mean, in audit engagements, there's normally a number of remedial tasks that need to be completed as you work your way through whatever the audit findings were, and Craig was instrumental and front and centre, I guess, in working with us on those.
Did you personally, at that time, engage in discussions with Dr. Wright when he...
Discussions outside of the specific tasks that we were working on with Centrebet, yes.
Yes. Could you describe that?
First started in 2007. Craig started to talk to me about a whole raft of ideas, concepts that he was working on related to electronic cash or digital currencies. That was, in the first instance, interesting to me because we worked in an industry where processing payments to from customers was critical. There were a number of other similar solutions that had found their way into the market but failed. And Craig spoke to me about all sorts of variants involving gold-backed digital currencies. He spoke a lot about immutable ledgers. I mean, immutable ledgers came into our conversations many times because there were solutions that he was proposing to us around tracking security-related events on our networks on immutable ledgers. Mm.
Was this relevant to Centrebet, registered and listed gambling?
It was very relevant to Centrebet. I mean, talking to me about various forms of currency and cash movements, and talking to me about modelling networks and having immutable ledgers to track the results of that were central. They were relevant. There was a nexus there, but there were a lot of things that he spoke to me about that were, as we progressed those conversations in 2007, 2008, that were not relevant to Centrebet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matthews. Mr. Matthews, we know from earlier in the case that Dr. Wright left BDO by the end of 2008. Before that, did he assume other responsibilities in Centrebet than simply giving advice as a consultant?
There was a time, and it was late 2008, I think Dr. Wright left BDO sometime during the last quarter of 2008. But around about the same time, we had a board subcommittee that was responsible for advising the board on security. And our committee was probably 6-7 people. We were all internals, and it was a recommendation from the floor of that committee that we engage an external expert to advise us as an independent. I chaired that committee, and the recommendation came to me that we approach Craig Wright, and when that reached my ears, I thought, yes, Craig is probably the right person to be advising us in this area, so I approached him and he joined our committee as an advisor.
You mentioned before the break that you discussed topics that were not necessarily related to the actual tasks that he performed. Digital payments,
yes,
peer-to-peer transactions, and
yes,
so on.
Yes.
Could you try and identify more closely which period this was?
Those conversations started in, I would say, the fourth quarter of